We are looking at pictures here at Minaninsanrinko in Japan, and you see the debris on the ground there brought onto land by that wave, that tsunami that brought boats and cars and debris from buildings. And what we're seeing there, if we can go maybe a little closer, are people searching for any possibility of survivors in the rubble there. And this is the town, of course, where we were telling you a little earlier, where 9,500 people are missing. That's half the population, nearly half of the population of the whole town. It is a devastating story. There are 9,500 people missing, their whereabouts not known at this point. And so we see these rescuers trying to poke through the rubble there to find any evidence they can of any survivors. Devastating thing to occur to one town.
Let's get you up to date now with some of the basics from this earthquake and the tsunami. 2.5 million customers are without power. That is down, though, from 6 million. International search and rescue teams are arriving in the country at the moment, and so far, Japanese officials have rescued 3,000 people. But more than 9,500 people are still missing in that one town alone that we just saw there, that Rosemary was talking about. It's Minaninsanrinko. And residents also tell us that food, water, medicine, and gasoline are becoming increasingly hard to find, even in places like Tokyo, which is 370 kilometers from the epicenter. So obviously a lot of anxiety there. And now we go back to that situation with the nuclear power plants. You've heard the word countless times, especially now that the two plants in Japan are in trouble. But what exactly is a meltdown? CNN's Chad Myers helps to break it down.
Meltdown means the melting of the core of a nuclear reactor, and literally after that, a large displacement of radiation throughout the entire atmosphere somewhere. How does it work? It works by a series of closed systems. This, when you're sitting in your car and you have the heater on in your car, you're not warmed because the fluid that's in your radiator is spraying on you. That would be an open system because you're spraying hot stuff on you. You are warmed in your car because there's a small little radiator under your dash. It's blowing a fan through that radiator. That radiator is warming the air and you're being warmed by that air. If all of these closed systems, work in a nuclear reactor, nothing goes wrong. Here we go. The water comes in, it cools down this. This is part of a turbine. The turbine is turning, whether it's a coal-fired plant or not, the coal-fired turbine warms water. Water turns to steam. Steam turns the turbine. You turn this down, you cool it off, you pump it back through here, and you cool down the reactor. Now, rather than burning coal and warming the steam, you've got a reactor core, and you have control rods, and you have pods here warming with uranium inside a nuclear reactor. Those rods are warming water, to warm steam, to warm a turbine, and this goes on and on and on. And as long as all these processes are working, everything works great. The problem is that it didn't work right because when the earthquake happened, power got shut off. This was generating its own power. The power shut off, and then the backups came in. The backups were little generators, literally. Then they got flooded by the tsunami. Then they had to go to backup power by batteries. Well, the batteries are only supposed to last for 8 hours. Put more batteries in, it's going and going and going. They couldn't get it cooled down. Now they're finally flooded it with seawater and boric acid, hoping that this is the final step. They have killed this reactor. This will never come back online. But that's the only way at this point that they can get this thing cooled down. Let's hope it works.
All right, Chad, with that explanation, and we do want to give you a better idea of where the Fukushima plant is located and look a little closer at weather conditions that could help or, of course, hinder any radiation release there. Meteorologist Ivan Cabrera is at the International Weather Center with that. Ivan, what are you finding there?
We're going to talk about your winds that are at the surface, and then we're going to talk about winds a lot. But let's orient our audience here. This is the earthquake, the 8.9. Here's the Fukushima power plant, the nuclear power plant. plant. And here, of course, is Tokyo, about 245 kilometers to the south and west, or about 150 miles. As we fly you into the plant, this is going to be important. We have that 20-kilometer radius that has been evacuated because of potential radioactive leak. Now, what I want to do is pull this out because we do have communities that are spread. This is not densely populated here, but as we begin to pull out, if we have more radioactivity leaking here, then we begin to get into trouble, because there is Sendai to the north, about 90 kilometers to the north, and the deeper reds you see there indicating denser population. In fact, Sendai has about 1 million people living in it, so that would be a problem here. Now, as far as the winds, that's going to play a role locally, because if there is radioactive material leaked, the winds are going to essentially move that, advect that to the north, south, east, west, wherever the winds are moving. And right now, we have an offshore wind, which I like to see, because any radioactive material would be pushed offshore, and I think that's going to continue over the next several days. So certainly some good news here as we begin to see an area of low pressure moving in from the south and east. We'll briefly have a southwesterly wind and then back again to a northwesterly wind. Now, I want to be very clear. These are the surface winds that will affect Japan locally and any spread of radioactive material if and only if we have a significant event at that power plant. Then we talk about the jet stream winds, which are aloft at 30 to 50,000 feet. And if radioactive material gets there, we share that with the entire planet. Again, that is only if we have a major core breach there at the plant, which at this point we do not. I'll be back with a forecast for the recovery efforts in just a few minutes.
All right. Thanks for doing the research on that, Ivan. Appreciate it. I want to send it back to Pauline in Hong Kong now.
All right, thanks, Rosemary. Well, let's put this nuclear emergency into perspective and recall two other famous nuclear disasters. That's 3 Mile Island in the United States and Ukraine's Chernobyl plant. In March of 1979, there was a partial meltdown at 3 Mile Island. In that disaster, the water supply to the reactor was mistakenly closed. The reactor core shut down, but a series of human and instrument errors led to an overheating situation similar to the one that we're seeing at Fukushima. Very little radiation actually escaped into the atmosphere.
Well, the Chernobyl disaster in 1986 proved to be much more devastating to the environment. Technicians were attempting an experiment, and they shut down the reactor's power regulating and safety systems and removed most of the control rods from the reactor core. A chain reaction started, leading to explosions and then a fireball, and the fire in the reactor's core released large amounts of radioactive material out into the atmosphere. 32 people were killed, dozens more contracted radiation sickness, thousands more eventually contracted cancers related to that incident. And radioactivity was spread by the winds, thousands of miles, contaminating land over Belarus, Russia and Ukraine, and as far west as France and Italy.